Hello, this is Anthony. Let's walk and talk. Well, today is the first day where I'm on some real nature for a bit, and it feels refreshing and amazing. Today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about who you really are. Now, most of you are going to say, What do you mean who I really am? I know who I am. Well, I went through a period of time in life when I thought I knew who I was until the day that I was introduced to really who I was. And what's interesting is that introduction really kicked off a chain of events, which led me to here. I would suggest I'm living my best life, although I think it's different than what most people might view as life based on the way that you are, and we always talk about this, programmed. So who are you really? You are a soul. You're a spiritual being. Now we're going to take all the religion and the woo and the mystification out of it to talk about something a bit more solid, so that anyone who chooses to consume this content is going to have a better understanding of what I'm talking about, and not immediately jump to things that are, shall we say, unprovable, and some people might say. So, who are you really? Well, you're your soul, and your soul is a piece or a portion of a universal consciousness. A universal consciousness that emanates from what Gnostics and whatnot in the past would refer to as the monad, what religions would refer to as God, what scientists refer to as the quantum. It's the unrealized within the realized. It's the space between the space. It's the ether that surrounds us all. Why is this important to understand? Well, because when you begin to understand that you are your soul, then what happens is that it opens up a completely different experience. Because then what you begin to understand then is that if I am a soul, then who is this character essentially that I am playing? And this character that you're playing is the character that your soul chose to come and play. You see, there's as above, so below, as within, so without. These are all essentially spiritual terms and terminology to describe what is actually happening in the universe on a much more simplistic level. Meaning, as above, so below is, the micro to the macro, and as within, so without is the self to the all. These are important concepts to understand, because this is a part of the journey that helps you to remember and discover who you actually are, versus, well, you can view this in a lot of different ways. The video game we exist in, the simulation, the reality you currently inhabit, however you want to view that. Again, they're all the same thing. As we go through these, in the past we've talked about labels, and we label things. And the reason for a lot of this is for description, for understanding, because we use a vocal medium to try to give perspective in the video game. However, external to the video game, you are consciousness, so you do not require voice to have conversation. Your energy emanates and resonates. You can almost, trying to get through the area there. You can almost view it like two computer programs interacting. They interact through voice, they interact through data and information. This is why, as we learn and study and understand the self, we start to see us from a different perspective. So I told you I would tell you who you are. You are the observer behind the thoughts. That's who you are. Now, it's interesting because most people, once they incarnate and they're seated into their physical form, they identify with that physical form and they say, this is who I am. Not realizing that the who you are has gone through a process of forgetting in order to have this exact experience that you're having. And when you begin to reconnect and remember who you are, it changes this entire experience. That's why it's important to understand things like programming and thought patterns. These are all patterns and cycles that you go through. And the purpose is because you're here to learn specific things about the self. And because of that, you choose specific challenges and studies to go through. Again, you hear a lot of people, and myself included, call this Earth School. We call this Earth School because that's essentially what this is. It's just a big school. And we're all here learning different curriculum. Some the same, some different. This is why, as you walk through this existence, you'll have people come in and out of your life. A lot of people say, oh, well, that's just coincidence, but you begin to understand that there is no coincidence because we are all together, connected, intertwined, and what we're actually doing here is we're actually utilizing each other's curriculum to help us to learn our own. So when you begin to understand that, you understand that coincidence does not exist, and you understand why, say, the person that you started dating 10 years ago and the relationship ended, and you're dating someone completely new or different, or you're dating someone the same if you're still in the same cycle, you can see how those souls, we all come together to help us to learn the experience we're here to learn. So who are you? The way I was introduced to this was through Eckhart Tolle, through the book of The Power of Now. And I remember specifically going through my awakening and having what some would describe as the dark night of the soul. And it was that. I think I've heard this and I agree with it. It should be better described as a dark night of the ego. It's essentially when you have an ego death and you look at the image in the mirror and you recognize, who is this? You don't recognize the person, you say, who is this person? Then you start asking yourself a lot of questions. And you go down an interesting rabbit hole where you begin to learn a lot about what you are and what you are not. For me, therapy, relationship, and then therapy was the real trigger for this. And again, I was brought to the power of now. In that moment, Eckhart Tolle describes how to discover who you are. And the way he did it, and I'm going to give you my version of it, is he said, just sit in quiet and watch your mind. And I was like, watch your mind. See what thoughts come up. And so I thought, okay, well, that's weird, but I'll give that a try. So I sat there and tried to think of blank and nothing. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And so then suddenly these thoughts appeared. And I'm like, I wasn't thinking of anything. Where did those come from? And what are those? Well, essentially, a lot of times that's the program of your body, the program of your mind, which is, resetting and starting the program again. And who you are is the person who is observing that. I remember very clearly the day this happened to me, and suddenly things felt different, and I felt different. You're going to say, well, what do you mean by different? It wasn't as if I was in my body. It was almost as if I was existing at the back of my head, looking through my eyes and watching an experience that I had chosen to be in, but not actually being in the experience. That was the day, out of the blue, I started walking down a hallway and my ears started ringing. People today, I laugh because they say, oh, well, that's tinnitus. You have tinnitus. No. That's tinnitus doesn't suddenly appear out of the blue in the quiet. Usually what happens is you'll do damage to your ears. You'll go to a concert, you listen to loud music, and then your ears start ringing and they just never stop. This is not what occurred. This ear ringing isn't an ear ringing for me. That's a nuisance, actually, and it very much is helpful because it helps me to understand the self better. When the thoughts start racing after many, many years of long and deep meditations, now I can be present, and when the thoughts start to go, I can stop the mind. In some cases, I can just focus and try to listen in hard for that ringing, and it's there. I have to listen for it, but it's there, and it takes me away from those thoughts and allows me to be present. So, long story short, who am I? You are the observer. You are not the thought. In fact, none of the thoughts that are in your head are necessarily your thoughts. The thoughts that are in your head are actually the thoughts placed in your head by your environment, by your upbringing, by everything around you that is not you, by everything that you consume through your mind, by everything that you consume through your senses. Those things all create the thoughts. And the problem we have is when we're not fully aware of it and we're still not awakened to the reality of who we are, we think those thoughts are us. And so we, instead of just accepting them as thoughts, we accept the message that those thoughts bring. And a lot of times that's a subconscious programming. And a lot of times that subconscious programming isn't there for your benefit. So think about that. The next time the thoughts are rolling through your head and you're thinking, a lot of times you look at it one way. You're thinking, I'm not good enough. Or you're thinking, I'm better than everybody else. Or you think that somehow either you're inferior or superior to your environment. Those thoughts aren't real. Those thoughts are the program running in your head. But what say you? How do you feel about that? Do you truly understand who you are? Do you understand how to connect to the self? And do you understand how understanding that can bring you a sense of better understanding and freedom of your experience? As always, if you enjoy this content, please like, share, and subscribe. I am truly grateful. And until I talk to you again, peace, love, light. I hope you have the most amazing day.